Hi, I'm Joni Patry, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Well, today I'm going to talk about another episode in my world of astrology. And I hope you're enjoying these because actually, I think they're the least watched of all of my videos, but it just feels right to do these. I think I'm doing these for actually your enjoyment. I thought it would be very entertaining to tell you my world of astrology and how I got here and what it took and what it's all about. Now in this episode, I'm going to be talking about my three sons. You know, I always say one of my greatest accomplishments in this world is the University of Vedic Astrology, creating my school. Except, and I always put that at the end, there is an exception to that, because my greatest accomplishment above all else is my three sons, Christian, Preston, and Austin. But I want to tell you a little bit about what they had to endure as my sons with me being an astrologer, because each one of them had a very different experience, and of course they're very different people, all three of them. So I'll start with my oldest son, Christian. And Christian was, well, he was born 1985, so I had him while it was the 80s. Remember what I told you about the 80s? The 80s is where, oh my God, it was like astrology was evil. It was part of the devil. And it was even illegal to practice astrology in many cities in Texas, in Plano, for example. Crazy but true. So anyway, you know, I've been an astrologer way before I had kids. You know, it was back in the 70s when I started. So Christian comes along and I'm, you know, into it. I'm doing readings and all. So when he was in Christian schools. All of my kids went to Christian schools because they were, you know, very good schools. So having him in Christian school back in the 80s, his teachers got drift of what I did. And they actually told him I was going to hell and that what I was doing was really bad and part of the devil. And of course he believed it. He didn't know any better. He was a child, and these teachers were, of course, very convincing, and you know, Bible, everything by the Bible, and there's nothing in the Bible that even says anything against astrology. So we won't even go into all of that about a Bible and astrology because it is profoundly spoke of in the Bible. And like I said before, all the popes used to use astrologers. I don't get this. But so it would be that he had some very religious friends. I mean, as extreme as it gets. And he was very concerned, and he was afraid that when he went to birthday parties and I came and I talked to the mothers, he was always so afraid that I was going to tell them that I was an astrologer. And of course I did. And he was mortified and horrified because they really put me in the category of a devil worshiper and satanic. And you know, they didn't want their child even to hang around Christian because of me. Now that was upsetting. I don't want my child to be ostracized because of something that I do or who I am. Very upsetting. And Christian became very upset with me. Very, very upset with me. And we would have arguments about it. And he would go like, what are you doing with all these weird people? Yogananda, Babaji. And I would, you know, talk, because I used to go to the Self-Realization Fellowship meetings in Dallas, and I was part of SRF, Self-Realization Fellowship. And that to him was the weirdest thing in a Christian school. It's like, who is Babaji? And he would kind of make fun of the words and things like that. And I would just, you know, politely kind of defend myself that spirituality, it's truth, it's, you know, astrology is this and the other. I tried to explain it to him. But he never got it till one day. And this is what I did. I sat him down one day and I said, I want you to watch a movie with me. Because what he kept telling me and what he kept thinking was, I'm doing this bad thing that's terrible, that hurts people. Hurts people, that's kind of what they thought. I said, I have a movie for us to watch together. And I want you to understand that this movie is, in essence, kind of similar to what I do and how I help people. And I got to tell you, you've got to watch this movie. And it's called Resurrection. It was put out in 1980. And the film director I thought was really interesting. The film director's name was Daniel Patry, and of course my husband's name is Daniel Patry, so that was interesting. By Ellen Burstyn, who was actually, she was nominated for an Academy Award for that movie. But what that movie was about, so we sat down to watch it, and what it's about is that Ellen, who played the part of this woman that in the very beginning of the movie is in a car accident, and her husband is killed and she has a near-death experience, leaves her body but comes back. And from that point on, she's a healer. And you know, it goes through all this stuff where she discovers she has this incredible healing power that is beyond belief. Healed the incurable. And so she lived in, I think, Kansas, but it looks like Texas. She lived in a very, backwards place where they're very Christian. And so she would do these healing sessions up on a hill and heal the people, and everybody was just like so grateful and thankful. And she said, this is something that comes through me to heal. But she gets this boyfriend who's very religious, and he asks her to claim Jesus as the healer and not her. And she says, I can't do that. It's a source coming through. I don't know. Anyway, he decided that her powers had to be from the devil. So he tries to kill her. But she survives. She got hit, but she survives. And after all of this, all of the calamity, even scientists tried to take her in and see what how she was capable of healing the incurable. It is a beautiful story. In the end, she just is fed up with it all and goes by herself. And there's so many other pieces I'm leaving out, but she goes and just retires and owns this gas station. And in the end, this family's coming through the gas station with their son, who you can tell is dying of cancer. And they stop, and she assesses the whole situation, that he's dying and this is their last vacation together. And so she pushes the parents away and says, go look at my garden over here, while she takes the boy and hugs him, and you know that she's healed him. And they drive off. It is so beautiful, because they didn't know their son was healed, but he was. And that's how she did it, indiscriminately, just doing the beautiful thing to help people. When that movie was over, I told my son, you see what she did here to help and heal people? That's what I do. He got it. Completely 180-degree turn from that day forward, and started learning about the autobiography of a yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda. Loved that book, and he loves my astrology. All of my boys do today. But I'll tell you something funny about him. I used to write this article for this big magazine that was D Magazine's competitor. I think it was called Lifestyle, in Dallas. Used to write the horoscope every month for years for that magazine, the sign horoscope. And I couldn't type. Imagine that. I've written 14 books so far and I still can't type that well. Because when I was going to high school, I decided I was not going to be a secretary, because that's basically most of the jobs that were offered to women at that time. I didn't want to learn how to type. I'm not going to be a secretary. I became a flight attendant. Didn't involve that. But anyway, didn't involve typing. But anyway, one time I used to have to put the article on a floppy disk. And I always had to have my sons help me with technology. So Christian, so sad. He was in bed sleeping. He was like 10 years old. And I had to get this article, you know, the next day, and he would be in school. I had to wake the poor child up to have him type my article, which was all handwritten, and put it on a floppy disk. And it was probably midnight. The poor thing. I am a horrible mother for doing that. I agree. But, you know, I had to get that article. Had to get the article and bring it. I used to have to drive up the floppy disk to get it. But one thing that happened after that that made it kind of worth it, we were in the grocery store. And you know how they put all the magazines on the, you know, right when you check out at the grocery store, National Enquirer, Cosmopolitan. But there was my magazine. It was always there that I wrote for, and D magazine. And right in front of us, in Christian's there at the grocery store, is a lady reading the magazine, opened up to the sign predictions that I wrote, and he helped me type it. And he saw that, and he was so proud that there was a lady reading my article right there in front of us in the grocery store line. So that was kind of a fun thing about my son, Christian. So yes, he's gone on to be incredibly successful man. I am so very proud of him. And so now let me talk about my son, Preston, who he was born 1989. So my son, Preston, he's always been like the psychic in the family. He used to see spirits and ghosts. And it would scare him naturally, but he would see them literally. And what happened when I had Preston and I brought him home from the hospital, it was real interesting because a peacock appeared on the back patio out of nowhere. We have no peacocks in our neighborhood or anywhere near. And my mother saw that, and it was standing in the door, peacock just kind of nodding and looking in. My mom says, that's an omen. And so I took little Preston, brought it over to the door, and the peacock kind of danced around. It was really weird. And the sun set, the peacock left and never came back. I had a dream soon after that, and I asked in a dream, what does the peacock symbolize for my son Preston? And I was talking to like a guru-looking man with a turban and a big gemstone here on his turban. And he looked at me and he said, he is a seer. A peacock's feather has eyes in it, and he will be a seer. So, wow. And he's the one that's always seen the ghost. And I used to bring him up to my classes at the Galactic Center, was formerly the Dallas Metaphysical Center. But I used to bring him up to my astrology classes, and he was the one that always recorded all of my classes onto a cassette tape. And meanwhile, he was learning and absorbing astrology. And he's the only one that can really read a chart out of my three sons. And so one time, and this is back when he was around 10 or maybe younger, but somewhere around that age, he looked at his own chart and goes, Mom, look at my chart. I'm going to be going on a big trip. I can see because Jupiter's about to go here and into my 9th house of long distance travel, and it's conjuncting my Mercury and my Venus there. I said, you know, you could be right. Soon after, he got invited to Switzerland by one of his friends to go skiing in the Alps. He predicted it. Thought that was so cool, and he did too. So that was really amazing about my Preston. But one thing I have to say that he saw that I didn't see at the time was the night before 9/11, September 11th. He had someone whispering in his ear, And he says, Mom, I cannot sleep. There is this foreign language being whispered in my ear all night. And he even said it even sounded like Arabic, if he ever knew what that was. But he said those voices wouldn't stop all night long. And he was very frightened. I had to sleep with him that night. The next day was 9/11. He saw it. He knew. And, you know, I still encourage him to take up astrology, but he hasn't yet, but I know that he will one day, because he really gets it, and he has that intuitive power about him. Very, very unique. And he's a really successful man as well, just like Christian. But let me get to my baby, Austin. Austin is actually 10 years younger than Christian. I spread my babies out. So Austin, he was born 1995. And so, you know, being around the house, being around me, I always had tarot cards. And it's funny because I would do a tarot card reading, and he would get underneath the table and manipulate the cards till he got his favorite cards to come out. He was really cute. But he was always proud of my astrology. As a matter of fact, he goes to kindergarten in a Catholic school. And, you know, these kids just, you know, like Art Linkletter, y'all don't know who he is. He used to say, kids say the darndest things. But my Austin was so proud. He came in there and he told his kindergarten teacher, my mom's an astrologer. And he said, that teacher goes, oh, really? Just like that. And I was thinking, oh, great, I'm in trouble. This is a Catholic school. They're going to not be happy with me from this point on. Well, it turns out she said that because she wanted my information. She became one of my best clients, and I read for her every single year for many, many years. Mrs. C, yes, she loved astrology. So from that point on in the 90s, everything was different. And this generation loves astrology. And he tells all his friends, and all his friends would come over and go, that's really cool. Tell me more. As a matter of fact, in his senior year in high school at ESD in Dallas, he would have me come up there and teach the psychology class once a year. And even after he left that school, I would go teach the seniors about what is astrology. And I remember I always gave the lecture about Rahu and Ketu, never naming Rahu and Ketu. I said, there's this special planetary cycle that happens every 18.5 years. And what it does is it changes everything in your life, and you're reminded about who you are and what you're here to do in this world. Every 18.5 years, I just called it cycles. I didn't call it any of the names or astrological names. And I said, and how old are you? They were all 18.5 years old. And I remember it being a Christian school because I remember telling them about the whole cycles, and that 2,000 years ago, something big shifted. And that's when we went into the age of Pisces. So when we went into the age of Pisces, it was 2,000 years ago. And I told them all, you know, these are the ages of mankind. I tried to make it real simple, and half of them looked totally bored. So I tried to make it exciting. So I said, so 2,000 years ago, we went into this age of Pisces, and this was the time of, look at it, Pisces is the fish. Guess what happened 2,000 years ago? And all of them just looked at me, you know, bored and to tears. And I said, Jesus was born. Isn't this a Christian school? And they all laughed. And I said, that started the whole Piscean age. And what is the fish? The fish's symbol is Christianity, and it's a Piscean age. So I made it really fun and relative, and I talked about the 18.5-year cycle, how their whole life was changing because they're all going away to college and leaving home. So Austin got my little gig there at his school to teach about astrology because he was so proud of his mother, and continued to be proud of his mother. As a matter of fact, bringing it up to date, you know, I always would give Austin took it really seriously, where he always had to have his predictions in his phone. I've told you this story before, I'm going to tell it again. So every 6 months, I would give him all his transit predictions, and he would type what was going to be happening on those specific days in his phone and put it in his calendar. And one day I looked at his chart, and I can't remember all the aspects, but there was like 3 things happening with Venus in his chart. Even transiting Uranus was hitting his Venus. I remember that. And I think Jupiter was aspecting Venus, and Jupiter was aspecting his Saturn, which is in the 7th house of relationships and marriage, and it ruled the 7th house. So there was a big aspect with Jupiter, yes, on that day. And even there was like 3 or 4 different things. I'll probably get back with you guys and look that up and give you exactly what happened. Why I predicted on that day that he would meet the girl that he was going to marry. And he was just out of college, and he was just starting his career, and he wanted nothing to do with a relationship at the time. Well, sure enough, on that day, he met his wife. And they are like instantly, you know, in love. And my son, Preston, was even there at the party. He said, Mom, it was really weird. They just like were talking for hours in a corner. And at the end of the night, Austin said to Colby, his going to be his wife, but his girlfriend that he just met, he said, my mom's an astrologer, and she told me I was going to meet you today. Look, and he showed her his phone where he had typed it all in. And I mean, I had her attention, and I really got Austin's attention. If I hadn't before, this clinched it. And to this day, Austin said, Mom, he's such an entrepreneur and a businessman, why don't we make a planner for everyone so they can experience the beauty and prediction of astrology? So that's the birth of our galactic planner. I wrote hours upon thousands of hours of all of these transits of, you know, like every transit that I could think of that was important applying to your birth chart. Such as Mars aspecting the Sun, is it in the 1st house? Then Mars aspecting the Sun in the 2nd, 3rd, all 12 house, wrote every translation possible for this. And turns out, Dia, I know you're watching this because you edit all my videos, who has been working for me for over 4 years, editing all my videos, actually learned Vedic astrology just from editing my work, and he could calculate the whole astrological calculations for a chart. So it all came together, and now I have the galactic planner, and my 3 sons, I couldn't be more proud. They are my greatest accomplishment in this world, and they all respect and love me, of course, needless to say, but they love my astrology as well. After all the trials and tribulations that we went through, and everyone that raises a child knows you go through a lot, but that's my story with astrology and my 3 sons. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.